I'm going to stop when I want to stop, not when you want to stop.
Hi, I'm Malicious Melissa and my co-host,
Adam.
and our guest, Goddess Evie, professional dominatrix and lifestyle educator, and her play partner, Domovic. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
So how did you get into the BDSM lifestyle?
You know, I've always felt like I have been maybe a little off or a little odd. I've always liked the things that were a little bit crazy. You know, when I got a spanking from my kindergarten teacher at age 6, I actually enjoyed it a little bit, but not so much the humiliation in class. Now that they don't do that sort of thing in school, I realize that maybe these are some of the beginning things that kind of got me into the lifestyle, being kind of introduced through regular, ordinary things that you don't think about, but later on you can kind of go back and go, oh yeah, I really remember reading the Playboy Joy of Sex manual that had the little drawings of the ladies in the stockings. Maybe that's why I have a thigh-high fetish and things like that. So I think when I grew up and started expressing my sexuality in all sorts of crazy and wild different forms, that it just sort of naturally became kink and BDSM because I was already doing it. I just didn't know there was a name for it.
Well, what was the progression? Like, how old were you? How did it go?
Well, I was reading that manual in my closet. Like, I knew there was something dirty about it because it was something my parents hid in their drawer. So I knew there was something that kids...
So it was theirs?
Yeah, it was theirs. It wasn't mine. But, you know, I took the information out of it, and I guess maybe that helped express my sexuality as I grew up. So I had a very interesting and probably not the most unique lifestyle as a child, you know. Just in a situation that repeated itself throughout my life. And I took that and realized, wow, I have a high tolerance for things like pain or situations where there's definitely a dominant or a submissive role that I was supposed to play. And so it kind of naturally evolved into what I want to do for the rest of my life, because I realized just as recently as a couple of years ago that not having it really makes a difference, and I'm not happy. So I have to be into BDSM, and I've used the things that I enjoy to express my sexuality. So really, only recently, like the last 15 years, really has it been BDSM related. But now that I found it, it's kind of like being a kid in a candy store. Now all these things that I thought were forbidden or and maybe they are still a little, you know, in the closet, but it's like now I can live it daily. I just have to filter, you know, who I speak to in regards, or make a little innuendo about it instead of, you know, being free and open.
So how long was the period where you didn't do BDSM?
About 2.5 years.
Okay.
You know, not being able to find play partners, that can be very, very difficult. And I had been in a particular situation that I hope no one in the BDSM world gets into, where the lifestyle was used as a means to go do something inappropriate. And so I felt like the entire community shunned me for a little while, because they were taking, you know, my SIRS side. I had a master at one point in time. I wore a collar, a locked collar, and I was in a very long-term, specific DS relationship, master-slaves relationship, that, like most relationships, had its problems, but we always had our fallback of the contract that we had for the MS. And when that was not used appropriately, it was something that I took a break from and decided that there was no way I was going to do this. But then, you know, it's about trust.
Okay.
And so the break was a couple of years, and now I realize that I'm coming back and I'm better because I'm a switch. I can play with more people, and I'll explain that term. In the BDSM world, there's different roles and there's different names for them, but basically there's somebody who is the giver of whatever it is that you're doing and a receiver. Oftentimes that could be a dominant or submissive, a master or a slave, or a top or a bottom. Sometimes the people in the community and kink world use those terms interchangeably, but they each have like a subtle, specific meaning that not everybody gets. Sometimes it can be confusing.
Sure.
But I primarily feel like as a dominant, I'm there to protect the person I'm playing with.
Okay.
Even while I'm doing painful things to them, like piercing their balls, or, you know, suturing them, or beating their ass and spanking them, or, tying them to a cross and flogging them. Those are incredibly painful things to some people, but to the people I'm playing with, I know there's an issue of consent. I won't do something to them that they don't want to do. And if somebody violates that contract, then we have the right to walk away. But in certain respects, like BDSM is kind of a as you go, kind of a laissez-faire sort of thing. There's no general rule book that everybody goes by. There's a lot of traditional stories and things as you look into the history of BDSM and the lifestyle, like Screw the Roses, Give Me the Thorns. What is it? Dottie Easton, I think, wrote that book, and that came out back in the 70s, and that was like the big kick, maybe late 70s, early 80s, I don't recall. But like that kind of kicked people into recognizing that this was a valid sexual thing. But then the internet exploded a lot of things, and it wasn't so secretive, and so you have good people and bad people in the community, and different things occur. So I think I went off topic, but could you redirect me to the question?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know I gave some good information there.
Yeah,
but...
and I have questions along the way now with that. So do you think sex and BDSM usually go together?
They are partners. Because you don't always fuck somebody who you just spanked their ass.
Yes.
And
I think that's one of the misconceptions.
It very much is. We are not swingers, but there are swingers who do BDSM. There are BDSM lifestyle people who completely abhor things like swinging and passing your partner around, but some people might do that in a scene. And when you go to a play party, or they might have a gangbang, or they might have some expression of sexuality that is different from somebody else. And so this community allows you to be able to do that. And hopefully not be too judgmental. So
after your break of 2.5 years, how did you get back in? What did you start doing?
Well, I gave it all up. I except for the professional domme.
So you were still doing that?
Still was doing. I was still using phone sex. I talk on the phone, and in a way I kind of feel like my professional status is like a therapy, like a sex therapist kind of level, because let me explain this a couple ways. I have a different level of thought between clients and my play partners, like Domovic over here, who is sitting here quietly not saying anything. And I'm sure he has a lot to say. But, I don't have him under any kind of an order or a gag rule or anything like that. He can speak freely because he's my friend and play partner. If it was my client, or if I was in a particular situation with a submissive slave as a play partner, we would have rules or guidelines for the evening to go out. And a client, I'm certainly going to have a business relationship with, more so than a personal relationship. But they do.
Be at your feet.
Yes, you would. You'd be sitting on the floor, nuzzling my feet only with my permission, looking at them longingly and begging for the opportunity to lick my toes. But that's a whole nother story. It's like the play that can happen even when you take a break from something and come back from it. There's two aspects in my life, and one of them was the professional. The personal play soured me. I was bored.
So you weren't doing that
I was
during
hurt.
The break.
Right. I was not doing that after the break. But the professional stuff, because I was looking at it in a different mind frame as being, I'm a service top. I'm here. I'm making money.
Can you explain that, the service top?
Well, like I said, there's different ways to explain the roles. A top is generally somebody who isn't necessarily in a dominant, submissive, or a master-slave relationship, but they are somebody who likes to play as the giver, in a play scene.
I see.
And so as a service top, what I do as a professional top, because that's basically what I am. I'm a professional dominatrix, yes, and I have lots of tools in my basket that you probably would be appalled to hear some of the things that I do. But you could go, ooh, that sounds like fun. But a pro-domme has kind of like a safety net because, we are outside of a personal relationship for me, and I felt like when I was on a break I could still do that and play and get something out of it as a service top by helping somebody have their play scene and go through the catharsis of the spanking or the ball torture, or being I do shibari and kimbaku, which is a tight binding with rope and a lot of rope bondage, and so I can still do that because I find the joy and the fun in that. But I couldn't find it personally. And then now I'm growing back and meeting new people like Domovic and although he's not really new, I've known him for a couple years. But, going out and doing more things and finding more people to engage in personal relations with now as a result of maintaining the BDSM lifestyle through the professional for a couple of years and then getting back into the regular after having somebody hurt me.
Okay. So you said that you were shunned. You were shunned by like friends that you...
Well, you certainly know when you're in any relationship that you're going to lose at least half your friends. You know, if they were, you know, friends with the couple.
Were connected.
Right.
I see.
But in the community, though, there is, when you mention things about consent and consensuality, and what happened to me was a matter of consent. I was raped by my then collared sir, who was supposed to have my best interests at heart. And even though we played very extremely, did a lot of strange things that, you know, most people would look at and want to call the cops on. This was, he violated my consent, and, you know, I was scared to death. I tried to run away and do all of these things. And so it was an extreme betrayal of trust. And so the community didn't want to believe that one of their own, you know, has done this.
Did you come out and speak about that?
Not at first. Because I was told specifically by people in the community that because I was in a role as a slave in a concrete collared master-slave relationship, that it would just make me look bad if I said something bad about breaking up with my sir.
Okay.
And I know that sounds weird, but that there's, you know how like they say there's like a blue code in police things. It's like even the cops that came back were trying to be understanding of the style of relationship that we had, because it was a domestic. I called the cops. I thought I was going to die right after the incident. But they basically tried to be understanding, said, well, you guys need better communication skills. And I found out later that, you know, somebody should have left the home at that point in time. So
you guys were living together
we were living together at the time.
Okay.
And then because I broke up, that meant my entire lifestyle left. I had to move. I had to, you know, reconnect with myself and decide whether or not I wanted to be a bottom and enjoy the sexual orgasms from doing that, and place my trust in somebody who is going to put me in a risky position. There's a very fine line between BDSM and the sexuality of that and abuse. And it's hard to define because I think in most respects it's defined by the individual. This was a specific incident for me where I felt I needed to take a break because he had so far, you know, on a personal level, had broken the general idea of consent and relationships that I couldn't, you know, and it colored a lot of things. The community, I didn't go to a lot of the social events. I didn't go to
before this or after
or
during?
this. Oh, before this, I traveled all across the country. For the last 10 years, I've been going to at least one BDSM leather kink event and educating people on everything from how to make latex to you know, how to play with people who have PTSD and mental triggers, because I know I do, and I play with people who do.
Okay. Because of the incident?
Well, me specifically because
prior.
of that, but from, you know, over the years, just prior what you know, I've been diagnosed, I see a therapist, you know, that sort of thing. I think a lot of people in BDSM do see a therapist. I think a lot of people have life coaches, things like that, but in the lifestyle itself, I think there's not enough emphasis on being able to see that it's not supposed to be used for therapy, but there are therapeutic aspects of play in BDSM that I think are really good. But because there's a high trust level and a high risk level at certain types of play, you know, you want to make sure you're playing with the right person. And I thought I was at that particular time. And it took me a couple of years to, like I said, really come back out of that and look for more play partners.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Binding trust is one of the most important things that's related to the BDSM playground, so to speak. Once you break that, it's almost impossible to regain it. And it becomes a very emotional thing because you're putting your safety, you're putting, you know, some of your most valuable personal secrets in the hands of someone that, you know, you trust. And once that binding trust is no longer, it can be a very destroying thing to a person, and that's what Evie went through. She could no longer trust anyone again. It took her a while to rebuild that.
That's why I felt the professional was a way to stay in the lifestyle and be helpful to other people, you know, and help them through their, you know, whatever their needs were. to help get them through the day, whether it was humiliation or piercing them or stapling things to them, whatever. It was a matter of being able to still have the things that I enjoyed without the taint of the negative on them. And so I think that that's something that a lot of people in the BDSM world may not be aware of, because they think that if they're a submissive, they have to put up with some of this stuff.
And just because you're collared doesn't mean that there isn't a level of consent necessary.
Or just in general roles. It's unfortunate, but dark side of the lifestyle of BDSM is there are a lot of people who really don't know what they're doing or don't care, or they use it as a means because you have roles that allow you to be vulnerable as a submissive, and in charge and in control as, a dominant or a top. And so there are people who, think it's okay to go beyond a person's limits, when they're saying stop or saying red and they don't, or just to make a play scene their own little thing about themselves, and they can be dangerous. I'm not the first person to say I was tied up and somebody took it further than I had anticipated in this world. We hear stories about this all over FetLife, all over, a lot of the community events. There's gossip and things like that about certain people. And again, it could be just gossip. I have one particular friend in Boston who was accused after a play scene, with the husband's consent being there, that he was accused of something that was inappropriate. And then, he was flamed on the community bulletin boards and things like that when he didn't do anything wrong. So that's a really strong area that a lot of people try to cover up a lot in the BDSM lifestyle, because we do deal with dark things and people don't want to admit where they might have had an oops. So that sounds kind of harsh, but it's a reality that a lot of people face, because you put yourself into vulnerable positions if you're going to be encased in latex, which I know he would enjoy, and I'm pointing over to Domovic over there. He would totally be loved to be encased head to toe in a body bag made of latex with just, straws coming out of his nose, and everything. I mean, and it's a total sensory deprivation and a total, experience. You want to talk about how it makes you feel while you're in that kind of submissive mind space? And then I can use it to create my point.
It's an escape. It's a complete release of any control whatsoever that someone would, that I would have over my own, even my own mind. It just takes over me entirely. It takes over I have no physical means of doing anything. I have no idea of what may happen next, because I can't see, I can't hear, I can't smell, really, other than maybe the latex itself.
Mm-hmm.
And why do you do that?
And it's an escape. It's just, it's a complete escape from the world, not having to deal with anything.
Does it make you feel safe or comforted?
It makes me feel safe if I know the person I'm doing it with.
Goes back to that trust.
Do you ever play with people who you don't trust or that you don't know well?
There's always the first time.
Okay. And so you haven't experienced that.
Right.
So
well,
you've been...
what I'm saying is that with every person that you play with,
mm-hmm.
there's a first time to that person.
Sure.
So you don't know that you can trust them fully. You're going to certainly trust them enough to play with them the first time.
Sure.
And that's where the trust foundation begins. How well do you do in that?
I'm putting him at risk, by putting him into this position and doing long-term bondage. But I've been doing this for years. Okay.
And you're an educator on it.
Right. And I work with latex. I understand breath play, things that are harsh and extreme. I've played, and I will let you know, I don't know if you know this or not, but the Chicagoland area is virtually known all over the world as one of the harshest, most edge players community. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of different groups, and they do things like, they do rape play, mm-hmm. But again, I don't like calling it that, because play and, the rape, to me, don't
Sure.
go together. Let's call it consensual non-consent.
Okay.
So there are people who have that fantasy about having an intruder come into their home. And I've been involved in situations where I've pretend kidnapped people with their consent in a white van, tied them up and take them someplace, and they had a great scene, and we dropped them off. They had orgasms. I'm putting a Hitachi on their balls. tells, and then we let him go and he's happy as a clam, so it really depends on the individual's imagination and what they want and how they're able to express it, together. And most people in the scene, I think the lifestyle, are very much into negotiating. I won't play with somebody that I haven't vetted. Okay, personally, me, I get references from 2 or 3 people. I'm like, oh, this guy asked me to play, especially if I'm playing as a bottom and not a top.
Okay.
Right?
But even if you're taking on a new client?
Mm-hmm. Even if I'm taking on a new client, especially because my job, I'm a sex worker. I will be arrested for prostitution. Not that I have anything against prostitution, but I'm not fucking my clients. I will not fuck my clients, except with a strap on. And that's something I really reserve for somebody who's more personal than somebody who says, I have $300 an hour here, can you fuck me in the ass? Because that's going to be a cop. The problem is that sexuality these days, even while it's being more open and more mainstream with 50 Shades of Grey, which is kind of laughable if you're really in the lifestyle.
We have everyone bring it up every single
You
guest.
have to, because right now, I hate to say that, but right now that, my first experience mainstream was CSI, and that's why I brought up the latex thing where the guy died because of being suffocated, but that was in a safe place, a safe dungeon, supposedly, with somebody who knew what they were doing, and
this was what, a CSI episode?
It was a CSI episode, but that was the first time that BDSM and kink and fetish was really...
Was that before 50 Shades of Grey?
Yes, it was way before. It was about 4 or 5 years before 50 Shades of Grey. And I can say this because I have read all of the Twilight Saga. Please, I'm sorry. I like vampire fiction. That is one of the role plays that I like to do in BDSM is vampire, and I like to suck your blood, that kind of thing. Okay. But, it's so I know the authoress, and I read her first initial chapter of her erotica as Twilight fiction, fan fiction. And as I read the book, I realized that while she has a good idea, she talks about a contract and things, she has some of the basic stuff, and she got that straight from Dottie Easton, from Screw the Roses, Send Me the Thorns. And it's but the novella itself is supposed to be fantasy, and I think far too many people believe that everything in this book is exactly what you should be doing in the BDSM lifestyle. And there are definite things in there that, if done the way they are written in the book, somebody could really get harmed by that. Now, I will say I will hurt you to within an inch of your life, but I will never, ever harm anyone, no matter what I do. And I do cutting and scalpels and burning and scarring, things that are permanent markings only with somebody's consent. But, the stuff in that book, there is a real rape there. That is the beginning scene. He raped her without her consent. And that is on screen, and people are saying that's a rape fantasy. In the movie and in the book and everything in 50 Shades of Grey. That's one of those examples.
In the book, he didn't rape her.
Excuse me, in the movie. Yes, you're right. Okay. But he did other things that were unsafe. Well,
she was ignorant. She didn't really know, so she couldn't give, informed consent because she had no idea what she was consenting to.
I will grant you that. But that's my point exactly. That there are a lot of people who come into this lifestyle, who see that movie, who read that book, who find something on the net about bondage, or who finally realize that they're watching bondage porn, or something that they really get into, and they want stuff like that. But you go to the movie, and this is supposed to be a multi-million-dollar movie, and you see somebody tying somebody up, and yes, I do shibari and kimbaku, so I'll pick this out with something that's going to harm them. Because it's going to lose blood circulation and all that sort of stuff. It's not that I'm trying to be so anal about the movie. What I'm trying to say is, please, people, even if that got your interest and you realize that you had some of the fantasies about being spanked and all that sort of stuff, don't take everything you read. There are resources that none of the people in that whole book tour talked about. You have Jack Ranella right here in Chicago, and he's written, wonderful books about the loving dominant. This is what I'm talking about, the nurturing dominant, the person who wants to bring out the best in you if you're a submissive, not the one who wants to prey on your ignorance. Do you see what I'm saying? Sure. So while there's some good things about both that story and some other things, it's just overall we have to be risk aware and have safe, sane, and consensual sex. Sex is fun. Who the fuck wants to be angry or resentful after a play scene? I want a scene where I can have a great time and come out of it after I get done being loopy, and both tops and bottoms have that same kind of escapist, those serotonins are going in, and you're really getting something out of your play in BDSM, both of them. But you want to acknowledge that you don't want ignorance. You want to be able to do something safe so you can get up and do it again and have a good time. I mean, the whole point is either orgasms or the denial thereof, right? Mm-hmm. That's BDSM.
Hollywood and media has always and continues to a large degree to misrepresent what true BDSM is. And, most of the media that I've seen in the past almost made it a joke. In fact, did make it a joke. I can remember many images in the movies where there's suspension scenes, and it's always, laughed at.
And not taken seriously.
It's really the ridiculousness of it all. And it's presented as being ridiculous and funny and weird and strange. So the media has always kind of distorted what the lifestyle truly is. And I think, for all the sins that 50 Shades of Grey has presented, mm-hmm. The one thing that it did do is it started conversation.
I'm grateful for that.
And it did, I think it presented a softer tone to the ridiculousness, made it a little bit more serious.
And it let the bored housewife who had the fantasies of being tied up say that it was okay for me to go ahead and have that. Let's go to a BDSM club, honey. Which is good.
That was the biggest part. Yeah. That it made it more acceptable to all those who are out there that have these thoughts, feelings within their heart. They no longer think that it's, well, gee, I'm the only one who has these
tendencies feelings,
these things that I'm having within me. There's a lot of people, obviously, who have this and are sharing it. And so maybe it's okay. And maybe I should explore it. And maybe I should look into it a little bit further. Hopefully they look into it beyond 50 Shades of Grey.
And you asked me a question earlier about play partners. It's really hard to find play partners that you can trust. So, if you're out at a social club that does BDSM and kink and or you're going to a dinner, we call them munches, where you know that there's a meeting and you're just going to meet at some restaurant somewhere and you're having some dinner, but you're all like-minded people. It's not exactly a dating scene, but at least you're surrounded by people who are like-minded and you can go out in public and talk about it and not be judged, which, while things like media he's talking about, people have always judged us for being different. Well, we're all different. We're all, I don't want to say broken, that's the wrong word, but we've all had experiences that made us who we are. Whether it's mine in the closet as a kid looking at the Playboy, thing and learning the words cunnilingus and fellatio, and then, having that move into something that later affects the rest of my life. I mean, we don't know that. But we do know that, like in BDSM, these are things that we enjoy, even if other people don't understand them. There are things that I don't understand in BDSM, whether I am a lifestyler or what I do professionally. It took me, this is going to sound weird, and I'll talk to you about it this way because I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I mean, as a professional dom, I'm going to separate lifestyle from what I do as a profession because the people in the community also tend to shun me because I do professional dom services, and they don't understand that. Mm-hmm. I actually was teaching at an event in Florida where I was also helping to put on like a theater program and all the, a show. I do a lot of stuff that is entertaining, but it's how I teach. But I call myself an edutainer or an educatrix because I use my BDSM in my performances and I make people think. About what I'm doing.
What are they, stage performances?
They're stage performances, and I took my kink because I have a high pain tolerance into my performances, so now I do circus sideshow, I pierce myself, I jump up and down a broken glass, set myself on fire, that sort of stuff. Use my fire play that I play on my clients, or like on my partner over there. It's like, I don't call him that. But anyway, it's like, all of this I took in because I brought my lifestyle into what it is that I do in my life. And, I think a lot of people don't recognize the need for bringing your life and the things that you need into BDSM because it's perfectly acceptable to buy a St. Andrew's cross or a flogger from somebody who made it at their home, but to pay me $300 for an hour of my time to give you what you need is viewed as, oh my God, you're using the community. And I'm like, why? I'm providing a service for somebody who may or may not be able to come to an event like this, for whatever reason, because, like my partner, he can't be outed It's something that, because it still is not mainstream, even if it is getting better, people don't understand it, they judge it, and they want you to pretend that it doesn't exist. So I gave in, and I took the professional domme off of my bio because I really wanted to go and do the show, and I wanted to do my educational thing. But even within the community, there's judgment.
Do you get paid as an educator as well?
Nope.
Okay.
No, it's purely volunteer. I mean, the most that I've ever gotten reimbursed or gotten an honorarium for someone has been they paid for my travel. Okay. Or they pay, they generally pay for a hotel room. It kind of just depends. Most people just go and they do this and they want to teach other people because they find something they're passionate about in the lifestyle. Like if you do rope, there's rope events all over the country, all over the world. If you're into leather, leather is a separate aspect of BDSM, and that's another aspect of my lifestyle. So leather and BDSM are very closely related, but one isn't more than the other. They're just kind of connected. But if you can have leather events, they'll have BDSM in them. You can have rubber events. People who like latex. International Mr. Rubber's coming here in Chicago, I think in November. It's just a couple weeks away. And it's all the lovely men and in some case women. But for the most part, this particular event is a gay male event. But women and men from all over the country and world come to at least go to the event, not necessarily compete. So there's different levels and different events for anybody who has any kind of an interest. If you want a foot fetish event, I bet you could find a foot fetish event. There's parties all over the city and kind of thing. But the underlying concept is that you're paying to get into the event to have fun, and there's usually a play party or something like that. But as a professional domme, because I play with people for money, I don't do it when I go to the play parties. I'm not charging people to get into an event that they've already paid to get into or anything like that. And I think that's what they're worried about, is that I'm going to make money off of somebody else's event. The people who put on that event who asked me to take, the event coordinators. And I'm just like, I don't understand that, because first of all, these are not people generally who would pay to come to the event. They don't want to pay, $200 for a weekend that they're only going to stay an hour. So it's like, I don't see where there's a competition. These are people who just honestly can't make it to these types of events, for whatever reason. So
or don't want to be seen at them.
Or don't want to be seen
You're
at them.
talking about your clients?
Yes.
Okay.
And so why there's a difference of perception of being a professional domme and having my clients come to an event versus me going to an event as just a person going to the event, being myself as Goddess Evie. Do you see what I'm saying? Lifestyle versus professional.
Yeah, so how do you separate the two? The things that you do professionally, you don't do lifestyle?
Nope. I do whatever I do professionally, I do lifestyle. But there are things that I enjoy more in the lifestyle. It's just that the person is different. The requirements for the person is different. Sometimes they move from being a client into being into my life and being a part of my life. And I'd probably say that probably happens very often, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
To you, yeah.
To me, yeah. Because for whatever reason.
So is it just about building the relationship?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is? Okay.
I think it's the difference in the relationship, and I have different expectations from a client. I actually have more problems from a client sometimes than I do from a personal. If somebody's coming up to me and asking to be my personal servant or wants to be my personal slave, I don't automatically say, okay, there you are, there's a collar. And I know that, there are people in the community who will just do that. Mm-hmm. I make them earn it. I don't know you from Adam, I don't know if we have any chemistry, I don't know if you just want me to fuck you with a strap on. And if you think that your mouth is coming anywhere near my crotch, I got to get to know you first. Just because there's sexual basis, for BDSM, for all of this, it still goes with consent. You're not going to do anything that I don't want you to do, period. And the difference between a client and my personal is basically a mentality of they're paying for a service, they get it for an hour, they go away.
The opposite is also true.
Sometimes.
Which is
that
what?
You're not going to do anything that they won't consent to.
Right, exactly.
Being professional, that's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Whereas if your lifestyle, there's more of a risk of it?
No, not so much. It's just as a lifestyle, you have a tendency to have people come and, oh, hey, you played with me, you must be my dom. Seriously, it comes from both ends. It's like you have a lot of people who have expectations because you played with them, as a client. Mm-hmm. How would you put it? Do you know where I'm going with this?
Expectations on your time.
They want a menu. A client sometimes wants a menu.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, because they pay me the money. That's a real difference, which I don't like.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying? It's like they think because they pay me the money that they have the right to tell me exactly what to do to them. Mm-hmm. Consensually, yes. But I always I'm not going to do 50 gazillion things with you. I only have an hour. I'm going to do things that I enjoy as well. And that's part of the vetting process. We talked about that earlier. Do I talk to my clients this way? And how do I get my clients? But, if they're into, I always ask, like on my phone calls, like, well, what are you into? And if they tell me that they're into something that I'm not into,
so
that's
you
fine.
do phone call interviews? Is that how it works?
That's how I normally start it. And
Okay.
and they either contact me by email and I interview them by email. I get some kind of a background or a story, and then I have them call me on my phone sex line.
Do you have a website?
I do.
You can share it if you like.
It's goddessevraven.com.
goddessevraven.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Separate the E and the V.
Mm-hmm.
E letter, V
Yes.
letter,
Yes.
not EV.
Yeah.
Not spelled out.
Yes.
Sorry, it's goddessevraven.com. Thank you. See? And you can even learn from your play partners and your submissives. They're allowed to tell me if I make a mistake, but then I just take it out on them later, so it's all good. No, it's oh wow, I'm rambling here a little bit. But no, there is a big difference in my play between clients and play partners, but only because it's whether or not I want to play. If I...
Well, what do you mean whether or not you want to play? So even if you don't feel like playing, you'll play for money? Or
Yes.
Okay, so that was my question.
Because, it's like, it's not because I need the money, but even if I'm not in the mood, I've made an obligation to have an appointment with someone.
Sure.
And it is my option because I'm a dominatrix. I can basically say, you know what? My time is valuable today and I'm a little, under the weather, so let's reschedule. That's always my option, and I have used that on occasion. But even if I'm not feeling good, it's like it's my duty because I've made this appointment. It's my obligation to go and give this person the best of my energy that I possibly can. Whether that's beating their ass over my knee or tying them up or making them eat my shit, it doesn't matter. I've made an obligation. I'm going to do that. I will do that with play partners too. But with play partners, I find that it's a lot easier to say, I'm not feeling good today. You want to reschedule? Than it is a client. Mm-hmm. And it probably does have something to do because I don't want to ruin a possibility of having an income. I don't think it makes it wrong, but it does make a difference in, I might be more willing to reschedule somebody who's a personal because I see them more often.
I think the key difference in professional versus lifestyle is in a professional environment, she's dealing with somebody who's coming to her with expectations. I'm about to pay this person for her time and her experience, but this is what I want her to do, and this is what I expect out of it. This is what I expect in return for the cash that I'm paying. Mm-hmm. In a lifestyle, it's not like that. In a lifestyle, it's much more negotiated. It's much more exploratory. It's much more sharing.
Yeah.
It's a mutual beneficial type of thing. We're both getting something out of it. When I approach a dame in a lifestyle, or really even as a professional, I haven't done that in decades. My concern is, or what I'm into is, they'll always ask me, well, what are you into? And I say, well, I'll give you a short list, which is what I'm not into. Here are my limits.
Okay.
It's usually about 5 things. And, the rest, have at it. Do what you think, will bring you the most.
And this is why I like playing with him and why he's a personal play partner, because he honestly wants my happiness. He'll do anything for me, even if it's something that is unpleasant.
Right.
So it's not about your needs.
No, it's not.
Okay.
But
It's
that's
not
very
supposed to
rare.
be.
That's, yeah.
No, she'll
That's
tell
very
you.
true.
I mean, that's
It really
rare
is.
in finding a partner.
It really is very rare. And it's rare in a play partner and a client, but more especially in a client. They expect more for that. So I have to have a different mindset for them and make it more clinical, make it more business.
Okay.
It's still fun for me. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to do something that I don't like. And I will do some more unusual things with clients than I will with some of my play partners, because I'll be honest with you, I care about my play partners a lot more. I mean, it's not that I don't care about a client, especially if I've had them for 5 years or 10 years or something. Like I said, eventually they become probably more my personal than my client anyway. But the assumption is they're going to help me out by paying my rent, or, buying me a trip or something like that than an actual, here's $300 an hour. Does that make sense? But with play partners, I tend to get a lot more people who...
Expectations.
Yeah. I don't want to say that sometimes with play partners, because I do give a lot of energy and a lot of attention and all that sort of stuff, I feel taken advantage of sometimes. Just a little.
For what? For the clients or?
No, from play partners.
For the play partners, okay.
Yeah, because it is a little more casual, don't you think?
Yes. It's
So
less
that-
defined.
Yeah, it's less defined than having a client. And a client, you have a set period of time. I have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I do that with my scenes. I create a beginning, a middle, and end, and I try to go wherever it's going to go.
Do you figure out the scene before you have the client come in, what you're going to do?
Depends.
Okay.
It honestly really depends. I figure out, like I said, a beginning, a middle, and an end. I try to be creative. I try to explore things that I would enjoy exploring, but I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. It's like I'm free to share my energy and my intimacy with this person in the terms that we negotiated ahead of time, but I'm always open to whatever happens in session. And I've had to punt in session sometimes, even with a client. He's come for something specific and something happens and maybe my ropes are not working the way I need them to work, or he has an issue. It doesn't matter if it's a play partner or a client. I mean, if you've had a bad day, you're not going to have as much fun regardless of what you're doing, and part of that comes down to communication. If your boss just gave you a really bad review at work and you've paid $300 to come have me beat your ass and you can't get off, and, it's like, well, that's not my fault. You need to tell me that your boss was here, and then maybe I can give you a few extra minutes of this and that maneuvered around so that your mind is not dwelling. I mean, that's my job. You're making it harder for me, whether you're a play partner or a client. If you're not in the right mind frame, I can't be in the right mind frame. And it's my job to guide you back into that space where you are escaping, like Domovic says. And
So you said get off, but you don't mean sexually, correct?
sometimes they can, yeah.
Okay. So is that where the police come into play, where
Yes.
there's worries about it?
Yes, especially in the city of Chicago, I have been told that any hand to genitalia is an arrestable offense. So even if I have a rubber glove and
But even if you're just doing bondage?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I am a sex worker, period, because I'm a professional domme and I do sexual activity for pay.
Okay.
I don't have to fuck them. There's no intercourse. But, but to be honest with you, you should have a podcast about everything that's good and bad about being a professional domme, not just about BDSM, because there's so many different aspects. It's like you're looking at a diamond, where you've got all the different little cutouts and you see a little reflection of the light in each one. There's all different facets to BDSM, to professional domme, to being a switch, to being a submissive, to being, involved in a relationship that went sour and having inappropriate things happen. I mean, all of these things you could spend an entire couple of
Sure.
hours, talking
Discussing.
about. But I kind of feel like, okay, here's some basics. If you want to be a pro-dom and you're looking to become a pro-dom for money, it's not going to work. I know that I say I do this for money because I get charged, but it's not a way to make a living. This is a full-time job. I have a day job right now and it's paying my bills.
Okay.
But I spend another 30 to 40 hours a week online, messaging clients, going on all the boards and saying hello and, going back and trying to get just a few sessions a month. That's not me working as a pro-dom full-time. When I was working full-time as a pro-dom, I ended up having to have a roommate. I mean, it's not a way to make a living. It's a way, because you enjoy it, to be paid for your time, because there is a market out there. Does that make sense? It's a business.
Okay.
The fact that it has sexual aspects to it make it harder in today's society to do it with the freedom. What's the word I'm looking for? Without consequence, maybe?
There are dominatrixes that they only do the BDSM and sex-related stuff for money, though. So,
True.
and that's how they make their living. They don't have day jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're able to do it, but they are spending many hours.
I
Is
used
that
to
what
do
you're
that.
saying? It was just too many hours?
It was just, it is, I was working 60 to 70 hours a week as a pro-dom, and
Can you break it down for me? Like, what exactly were you doing? You were doing phone sex. You were doing sessions.
I'm doing phone sex. I'm doing live sessions. I'm doing videos and clips. I'm doing
like clips for sale.
Clips for sale is one of the sites, but there's a ton of sites that you can do on. They're one of the better ones that actually pay people. And Night Flirt's one of the better ones that actually is really good for phone sex. There's a lot of phone sex things out there, but I trust Night Flirt. Been with Keen they used to be Keen. They're now some other program, but I've been with them for almost 15 years. So they're trustworthy. There are trustworthy sources to start making some money. But again,
and sexting
and doing all that, you pay, you charge what you feel you are valued. Never discount yourself. I don't discount myself. If somebody calls me up and says, I only have $200 and you charge $300 an hour, would you mind seeing me for 45 minutes for that $200 or half an hour? I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I won't. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not devaluing my services for your convenience. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? I'm a real business, but I do provide a service. It's like a catering service. You don't ask a catering service who's brought you your macaroni and cheese, and all that sort of stuff to say, do you mind now that you've had the meal, could I possibly get a 20% discount off of this because I didn't think the macaroni and cheese was very good? Mm-hmm. So it's we're not a menu, As far as being able to do it full time, yes, you can. There are people out there who are very famous. I traveled all over the world, most of the time for free. But again, it's a lot of work. When I travel, I spent almost 80 hours a week working on booking my gigs for my sessions. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get mostly cancellations, no matter if you're, a very famous, pro dominatrix. There's a bunch of them, and I'm not going to mention particular names because I haven't gotten their consent. I'm sure they wouldn't mind the PR, but, without talking to them ahead of time, I don't want to say what their names are.
Sure.
But, they do make a living at this. They are the ones that Dr. Phil or somebody calls when they want to have a professional dominatrix come on. There's sex educators all over the country. I mean...
Do you consider dominatrixes sex educators?
No.
Okay.
In some respects, yes.
Okay.
This is me. This is who I am. It is not all professional dominatrixes. It's just like... we're not all any one thing. These are just different aspects of our lives and lifestyle. I chose the pro dominatrix because I was in a relationship at the time where I wasn't supposed to work, but I needed to bring in money, and the hours had to be at my choosing. So I could work from home being a professional dominatrix.
So you would see clients at home?
Yes.
Okay. So that's why you had to screen them, because you were bringing them to your home.
Right, but I screened them because I would take them and rent a dungeon as well. I always screen my clients.
Okay.
I mean, there's certain things...
But I would think it would be a heavier screening process when you're doing private.
Yes. And there were some things that I learned through someone else's misadventure that, for whatever reason, there's a statute that, you have to have 2 doors that you go through into a place where an activity like that takes place, whether it's a private home or not. If you're charging money for it, you have to have 2 doors. So I do. I have... my locked door, my front door, and I have my security door downstairs. So at least that way, if somebody presses my buzzer and wants a scene, I know that he's not going to be a cop, because, you know what I mean?
I don't understand how that works. Can you explain that to me?
There's a lot of little statutes that let me start from the beginning. The pro dommes here in Chicago, and all over the world, kind of have their own networking community events. They have DomCons all over the world, usually LA, or I think it's in New Orleans this coming fall, in a couple weeks. And so they get together and they talk about, how can we be professional dommes and dominatrixes better? Just like any other event, convention, we have our own conventions. And so we get together and we kind of talk about the clients that we've seen. Oh, have you seen this client? Yeah, he came up to me. So we kind of also provide, I hate to say, a blacklisting service for people who we've had issues with. But Chicago has its own blacklist. Chicago has people that you don't want to play with for one reason or another. Maybe they don't pay, or maybe they are too much of a pain in the ass, or they won't go away. There's a lot of reasons for why somebody's a bad client or a bad play partner,
What do you mean they don't pay? You're not getting the money up front?
No, they do pay for their hourly charge, but then here's where it becomes difficult. In order to maintain your business, you might have to text them a few times, or they'll be texting you 15 or 20, things like, oh, I had such a great session on my way home. You know what? I'm whacking off in the car. Do I have permission to whack off? And you're going I just got done the session and I really want to go clean up. And now you don't realize that I have to go spray, Cavicide, all of the frickin' equipment that we just used and clean up everything. And I'm spending really 4 hours prepping and an hour playing and another hour or so cleaning up. And you're sitting here demanding more of my time. Mm-hmm. Does that make a sense?
Of course.
So it's more about what's outside of the session. Sometimes clients expect more outside of the session rather than... And so that's what I'm talking about. They don't pay. They want the attention, but they don't want to give you the money for it, or they don't want to do something in trade. I tend to do more barter, than straight up cash these days, because if I need somebody who needs to work on my website, I'll put an ad out there for I'm looking for a submissive who has IT background, and we'll exchange services. Those tend to become more of the play partner types than the clients, but it starts out the same way.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Okay. But like if you're doing something with somebody who takes up a lot of your time, but they're not willing to compensate you for that, whether it's by cash or by services or something like that, then yeah, that's when they don't pay. That's
so that
when
would be what you guys would talk about.
Yeah, we'd say, this client really, really wants a lot of your time. He texts all the time. He wants you to do this. He wants to do that. He wants to tell you his fantasies. And I'm pretty stern, but I know people who are harsher, than me, by saying I'm cutting you off because, I've had enough of you or something like that. But that rarely happens. I just basically say, okay, I'm in charge, so I don't need you to tell me what to do. I'm going, you may not text me anymore. And if he does, then I won't see the client. Because obviously he's not going to be, submissive enough and pay attention to my orders. So I'll find another client. Money will always come in. Clients will always come in.
Well, so it's easy to find clients but not play partners.
Exactly.
Because of the trust.
Exactly.
Being a professional dominatrix is, I would say a majority of them don't make it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's
because
very
they can't.
difficult to earn a full-time living
Okay.
being a pro. It's not as easy as everyone seems to think it is.
Well, I know that there's a lot of education that has to come into it. So that in
Right.
itself, you're spending so much time educating yourself, so you can provide service.
But
back
most
up my
people
statement-
don't. That's the
back up
problem.
my statement, if you simply look at, the so-called pro-doms that are marketing themselves out on the internet today, look again in a year from now, and most of them are gone, replaced by new ones. And it's just, they don't even make it a year. Many of them don't make it 6 months. Because they go into it with this impression and this expectation that they can earn a good living at it.
Without doing the work.
And it just doesn't happen.
Or they're the type of person who thinks it's okay to go and call themselves a pro-dominatrix, and they're really providing sexual favors and they're beating somebody's ass too. So real professional dames, we have gotten together and said, having clients who expect sexual favors for that, in addition to the BDSM, has made a black mark on like how to be a professional dame, because there are a lot of people who will be, you use the term escort, which again, have friends that are escorts. I'm with SWAP, which is a supportive group that allows people who are sex workers, they help get them legal care or homes or whatever, it's called SWOP, SWAP. But
what do you do for them?
I just volunteer and raise some funds, donate, things like that. And they helped me out recently with some legal issues. So I like to give back. But, as a pro-dom, there is no resource for you to go to train. You have to kind of maybe find a good dom that's successful enough that you can follow in their footsteps. But that doesn't mean the type of education that you're getting is going to be a good education. If you have a dom who is not good with cross-contamination issues, like if you have, bodily fluids, blood, pee, cum, on certain objects and they don't clean up properly, you could transfer anything to somebody else. I mean, and so if you don't learn the proper techniques of being able to play as a professional, you could just end up being one of the people who thinks it's okay to earn a purse by kicking somebody in the balls out of a restaurant, which I think is totally inappropriate.
Why do you think that's inappropriate?
Because you're in public and you are doing something with people who you have not gotten their consent with. I will do limited public play.
What do you mean gotten their... They've already gone over it with you, haven't they?
let me rephrase because I
Yeah,
think you're
I'm not
misinterpreting.
understanding. I am, yeah.
My client, if I was that dom who thinks it's okay, hey, let's go shopping. I'll buy you a purse, but can you kick me in the balls right here after dinner at the restaurant table?
Okay.
You know, it's like you are incorporating everybody else who is in that restaurant as part of your scene without going up to every one of those
it's
people
the
in the
other
restaurant.
people. I
Yeah.
see.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So for me, I do public play. You know, I will dress a beautiful or even an ugly person up, you know, as whether they want to be sissified or, you know, turned completely transformed into transgender. I do both, you know, whether they want it as a humiliation factor, if they're trying to do it for a lifestyle. I'll be happy to dress you however you wish. I love dressing up. It's like playing with dolls. But, you know, and I'll do public play with them. You know, but I'm not going to go and do something that's going, you know, if you don't notice that there's a kid watching, I mean, you know, come on. I raised my son. He's 18 years old. He knew what I did. You know, I told him little by little as he got older. Now he finds it not so pleasant, and I can understand that because it's not his thing. But he does understand that this is what I do. This is my lifestyle. I never really left anything out. Now that he's out of the house, I have toys, you know, on the walls and things like that. I don't have to worry about hiding things from him. But I don't do things in public that are going to make other people feel uncomfortable or bring, I guess, what would be a bad reputation to the lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah.
I actually got down from a gay pride float once because I saw somebody who was marching with us as kinky BDSM leather people in the gay pride float here in Chicago a couple years ago. And he had a little tiny flogger. And for people who are listening who don't know what a flogger is, it's basically a bunch of leather strips or cording or some type of strings on the end of a handle that you hit people with in order to give them a particular impact play. And depending on how you hit them, it could be something that's a sensory play or it could be something that hurts. And different people like different things, right? This gentleman was walking through with our contingent he apparently snuck in, and he was holding on to like a keychain size, you know, 6-inch long flogger, and he was going up to people walking with us behind our truck and with all the people walking with our pride flags and everything, going up to people in the audience and thrusting that flogger in their faces and trying to hit them in the audience. And I'm in a red leather corset and G-string and thigh-high 6-inch patent leather heels. You know, we're on the truck throwing things out for the pride thing. And I get off the truck, walk over to this guy and say, what are you doing? You realize that these people came here to watch the parade. Why are you trying to slap them in the face with the flogger? You know that goes against consent. Which group are you with? Oh, I don't know. I just like came in the parade. I saw you guys marching, so I figured I'd join along.
He wasn't even a part of it.
So he wasn't even a part of it. But do you realize what I'm saying about perception? The perception of BDSM is that this man is up there just flogging away with people. And that's entirely opposite of what, you know, we're talking about here, about why we do some of the things that we do, and that whole level of trust issue and, you know, level of consent and, you know, being able to express yourself in a way that's not going to harm anyone else. And I'm trying to explain this to this guy wearing this outfit in the middle of the parade, and the float's going up there, and this guy and his girlfriend ended up walking off the parade. But I look and I see 2 parade officials and 2 city cops stopping and looking at me because I'm sitting there wagging my finger in his face trying to explain to him the idea of consent and why are you in with us. It's not that we don't want you to come in here if you want to play with us, but there's safe places to do that. Mm-hmm. And while we are throwing candy and beads and condoms into the crowd, we're not going up to them and specifically throwing our toys in their face. And so I feel like that's kind of, you know, where my line is. Does that make sense?
It does.
Does that explain some of the things about between pro-dom and personal play too as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I still wanted to go over your timeline of how you got into things.
Oh wow, I did really go off tangent,
Yeah.
didn't I? I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, you're fine. That was
well,
great.
let's see. Okay. It's hard to say.
Like, how old were you when you became a pro? What did you do before you were a pro?
I was in logistics before I was a pro.
Okay.
I had gotten into this relationship. I was married at one point. I had my son. But we had been separated and going through a divorce. And I was looking for new partners and various things. And I had been...
Were you into BDSM at that time?
I
during,
was,
like, your
yes,
marriage?
but I couldn't find any place to do it. Do you know what I'm
your
saying?
husband was not into it.
Not at that time.
Okay.
He didn't. I expressed an interest in exploring that, and at that time, he really didn't want to.
Okay.
You know, that was just a level of what we had in our relationship. But, you know, so I had been talking about it with friends, and this was when I was, let's see, my son was 7, so I think it was about 37, 38 when I started. And when I started actively going to like the play parties and and becoming an educator with BDSM and kink was about age 37. And
So the play parties were that was the first step that you took?
I went to an event. Yes, I went to an event and went to a play party, and I was glommed on by a bunch of old guys who thought I was a submissive, and I wasn't at the time.
Was this a dungeon?
No, this was a restaurant. This was one of these munches.
Oh, okay. So that was the first.
That was the first ever official experience that I had in kink. And then they told me about an event coming up, which was Kinky College, put on by a local social club. And
So you had joined FetLife. That's how you found out about the munches.
oh, nope. FetLife came many years after.
Okay.
That was the hard part. See, you guys, I mean, whether you know gay history, leather history, anything like that, you probably have heard of Stonewall, but you really don't know what it was like to go to anything BDSM related in history.
No, I mean, we've had some guests on and they were talking about that they had to go into like porno shops and look through magazines.
Find an
to try
advert.
we
Find
heard about
somebody's
that.
address, put an envelope in there, wait a couple of weeks, and
yes.
then they'll tell you to go to this other shop and look in this book where they put the address to the club where you're supposed to go, knock on the door, say the password, that kind of thing.
Very underground.
Oh, it's very, very underground. And even in...
And you were into it when it was like that? Or no? Was it
No,
after that?
I didn't know enough about it then.
You were?
He was.
Okay.
He's older than I am by about 10 years. But I knew the history of it, but I couldn't find it myself. I didn't know what porn shop to go to, and I didn't know, so I looked
how
online.
did you find out about the munch?
I went to the Exit
Okay.
and
For
saw
what, Bondage A Go-Go?
for Bondage A Go-Go,
Okay.
and they told me about some events happening and all that sort of stuff. But that was the only thing that was BDSM related that I could find anywhere in Chicago because it was
Okay.
so underground.
Okay.
But it's not even real BDSM. It's but it is professional dominatrixes that run it.
Mm-hmm.
And so they suggested that if I wanted to get into the scene, I go to these couple of events, and that's where I met people.
Okay. So then
And-
you did a dinner.
Then I did a dinner. I wasn't sure that this was for me because the only people who wanted to do anything at all with me were people I would be going like, ooh, grandpa, ooh, so, and I was kind of offended that they thought automatically because I'm kind of petite and thin and have a Betty Page look for the most part, maybe not today, that they just automatically assumed I'd be the one who'd be the submissive, because I hate to say it, but, BDSM really, really likes, young, thin girls and vulnerable people, unfortunately,
I've heard that from other guests too.
And because people honestly have social awkwardness and don't know when enough is enough. Because in BDSM, no does not always mean no. And that's a sad thing to say, but that's why we use different words to say, okay, this has to end now. So, most people do the yellow or the red. Say yellow, hey, I've kind of had just about to the point of where I've had enough. And red is there's a problem or something. Doesn't necessarily mean play's going to stop, but you're at least going to be checked in, and stuff like that. So, yeah, a lot of people tend to get glommed on. So it was hard for me to find a way into the scene. But when I found Kinky College and found the actual event with all the educational classes and stuff like that, that's kind of when I took off and ran. I ended up getting to know some people through that event that I ended up having the relationships with and been in the lifestyle since then. FetLife hasn't been around that long. I know John Baku, so it's like, he had a great idea, and and it is a really great resource right now for hookups and things like that, but it's also been problematic too, I think, for the BDSM and the lifestylers. All these debates about swingers and BDSM and all these questions you've asked me, people do that on FetLife all the time. But, it's not necessarily accurate information like any other social media. It can be just as misinformative or have its own alternative
because
news.
it's open to everyone. It's not always a qualified answer. It's not always a qualified response that you're getting to your questions. You're getting answers to questions from people from various walks of life. Not that their answers are wrong, it's just that's their interpretation. And unless you take into account where they're coming from, you're not really going to get accurate information.
You know,
it's easy to say I'm a dominant.
Yeah.
You know,
when you're on the internet.
It's easy to say I'm a submissive. But if you really haven't experienced it, and if you're really not part of the lifestyle, you know, or if you're new to it, then
you might get preyed upon like I did at that first munch.
You know,
you know?
It's a little difficult to really be able to give an intelligent answer toward it. You've got an interpretation, you have an expectation that you have to deal with, and a lot of it, truthfully, is fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is, when we talk about the appearance of a dominatrix, the reason it's important is it's still a fantasy. It's a fantasy of the person who is hiring that person or getting involved with that person. That this is how I imagine somebody who's going to dominate me to look like. And part of that comes from the media, part of that comes from...
I always ask if they have any wardrobe requests.
Things of that.
Things of that nature. Just so that I can help them along with their fantasy.
Sure.
But a lot of the times, I've had people text me their fantasies, and I've had fantasies on the phone. Some of them, even I would be going like... you can't just hear the face that I made, but you'll see it on the video. But I'm just like, there are some things that I've heard and done in the BDSM world that I probably, would question, oh my God, I cannot believe. But I'd rather have them do it with me on the phone than in reality. So if you keep it in that fantastical, that's why sometimes clients versus play partners are difficult, because it's actually easier, I think, for me to satisfy a client's fantasy than it is a play partner's.
The difference between those who understand what BDSM is and those who do not is really in, if you can understand the dance between pleasure and pain and know that, to me it's like the yin and the yang, you can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
You would never appreciate the night if
you didn't have the day.
If you didn't have the day, you would never have a sunny day if you didn't appreciate the rain. Well, the same is true about pleasure and pain. If you don't know one, you're not going to appreciate the other. And there is a dance that intertwines between the two. Pain can become pleasurable, and pleasure can become painful. Most people know that part. They know that, too much pleasure can become painful. But not too many people really switch it around and understand that pain can become quite pleasurable and add to the experience. If you can understand that concept, then BDSM is for you. If you can't, then the question always becomes, why do you want to hurt someone you love?
I've had to teach people how to do that. There's a specific type of play called rough body play, where you slap people in the face, you punch them, you kick them in the balls, you beat them up as if they were, like a smackdown in MMA, but you're doing it in a loving way because it causes them pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people do not get that. They see it as, I'm hitting my partner. Mm-hmm. From the outside, it can look like abuse, like I said earlier. But the flip side of that is the person who's doing the hitting really has a hard time. They can go and they can smack down, anybody else if they have multiple play partners. But that person that they care about, I find it very difficult sometimes to be sadistic with them. Or as sadistic as I want to be sometimes, because I'm afraid I might go too far.
Do you consider yourself a sadist?
Yes, but I'm a masochist as well.
Okay.
I'm a sadomasochist. I mean, that's seriously, I enjoy inflicting interesting things that may cause discomfort or a sensation or sensory experience for my people. And that could be something that is pleasurable in the normal sense of maybe a light touch along the arm, or it could be like, tying their balls down to a board and smacking them. It's really something that I enjoy.
Such a tease.
I know, you want it so bad. But it's like, what's the best way to put it? It's like, yes, I'm a sadist, but I'm a sadist because I know they want it. Mm-hmm. It's like, I wouldn't be doing this if...
But does it give you pleasure to inflict pain?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
but see, I don't call it pain.
Yeah, it's not, see, as a sadist myself, and a masochist, but as a sadist, I achieve pleasure from inflicting the pleasure that someone gets from the pain I offer them.
What if they don't like pain? But would you do it just for your pleasure?
No.
What about you, besides money?
I need the response.
I'm a response junkie myself.
The pleasure comes from the response of the person I'm with.
And that's true whether I'm playing with a client or a play partner. But I have taken somebody... See, you're talking about...
Anything, whether you're a top, bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
But
you know, if you're not
I don't
getting
call it
response-
pain. I don't call it pain anymore. I mean,
What do you call it?
I call it endorphin manipulation. It's a sensory intensity.
Well, even if they don't like pain, they're going to get that endorphin manipulation from you.
They are, but
So-
it's, you know, the thing is like, okay, let me give you an
They'll
example.
be misdirected.
The thing is it's how you look at something. And it's often very hard to eroticize something that either you don't understand or you fear. And the way I feel that I play, and this is just me, I don't know anybody else that, you know, has expressed it this way, but whether it's with a client or a play partner, this is why I took pain out of it, because I used to always be afraid of pain until somebody started punching me in the pussy and I squirted all over the place and had the best orgasms I possibly had. You know, I'm like, that's not painful.
Punching with their fist?
With their fist or kicking me with their boot right into my cunt. I swear to you, it is something that I never in my entire world thought that I would ever get off on sexually. And I do. You
There's
know?
a term for it.
Yeah.
It's called cunt busting.
Yeah, cunt busting. It's the same like ball busting, but instead of, it's with women. But it, you know, there are specific. Now I think I'm just having this image of like ball busting and cunt busting, and I forgot what I was saying. Could you refresh? Could you redirect? Because I had a point here. I really did.
I'm glad I did that to you.
Thanks. You'll pay for it later. But it's really about looking at something in a different perspective. We talked briefly about like his part about the escape and how he goes into subspace and how he feels comforted by letting go. A lot of people really need to let go, so they need that quote unquote pain or that sensory
get into
intensity
subspace?
to get into subspace.
Okay.
And or to get into the right headspace to appreciate it. But it also depends on the type of person you're playing with. I have one person who is the ultimate slave. That is his goal. He's a very high-powered person. He's not a client. He's a personal play partner. He saw me as a client first few times, and then we decided that, you know, we liked each other better as friends and would rather have the more intimate interactions. And it's like his goal is to be the best slave ever. He wants to do whatever it is that his dominant for the time wants him to do, whatever pleases them. Within his limits, you know, he can't do anal sex or anything like that, so he doesn't fuck people, and he has a wife who is aware of his needs, and she doesn't dominate him. She's a spouse, but he comes to me occasionally to play, and he plays all over the city. He's known for being a slave, but he can't take pain. He's not a pain slut. And our session was me caning him, and he was enjoying that he was making me happy because I enjoy caning. But he expressed when we took a break that he couldn't figure out how to get past the pain. And I says, 'cause you're fighting it. And what people don't understand is that you fight what you fear. You know what I mean? You fight what is something you don't comprehend or understand. If you take the fear out of it and you change your mindset, then it's not pain.
Well, yeah, the body's natural reaction is to shy away from pain or harm.
But one of the problems with a lot of people is being able to let go. And in this role as a submissive, I told him, okay, instead of thinking about taking my cane wax, think about your position. So I made sure he thought about his position, and every time he moved out of position, you know, I would remind him, and he would get back in there. And he took like 3 times the amount of caning.
He was focused on something
Exactly. And so part of my job is to be able to get somebody to look outside of that.
So pushing their limits.
But doing it in a way that is consensual with them.
Sure.
To be able to get them to where I think that this is leading. You know, that's why I say I have a beginning and a middle and an end when I play with somebody, because you never really know where things are going to go. You could end up in the middle of a scene where they're having a panic attack and a complete, utter nervous breakdown, and you got to know what to do when that happens. You got to calm them down, and you can't freak out yourself. I mean, you know, I tie up people for a living, and I don't use knots all the time. I mean, they're 10 feet off the floor. That's no joke. I perform, and I don't use knots. I use the tension of the rope. And I freak people out with that. I use bends in the rope and because that's what you do in shibari. I mean, there are a few knots, but I mean, I know like 60 knots in rope that are decorative and safe and this and that and all that sort of stuff. I use 6, So I use some of what I do in a way to get them to think outside of it. So if they're like saying, oh, like this rope hurts, I'll run my finger underneath there and make them feel a little bit better. But then they like might not really be getting into the suspension. So I say, whispering in their ear and tell them, hey, I'm not using any knots. You're being held up by nothing. And then usually the expression on their face is like, and then they realize they're in the ropes and they're safe and they're not going anywhere. You know what I mean? So like they realize it's like a little emotional breakthrough. Once they can get past that point of their own inhibition or that's why we talk about trust and vulnerability, because I'm putting you into that vulnerable place and you have to trust me. But I know that with my ropes, even though I'm not using any knots and he's 8 feet off the floor in a suspension rig, then it's like he's fine, he's safe, because I'm capable of doing that. I know I am capable of doing that. And the last thing you really want to hear from a dom is oops, unless I'm doing it to fuck with them.
Sure.
Right?
When I dominate someone, I'm a switch. I don't know if we established that.
I think we did earlier.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, when I dominate someone, I work with an outline. So much like Goddess Evie, she has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I pretty much have a beginning, and I have a good idea of the things that I may do with someone. And I work off of that outline. But as I just said briefly earlier, I look for a response. So once I begin, anything can change because I'm looking for the response from that person. And that person's body movements, that person's reaction to whatever I'm doing to them is what directs me to do the next thing. Because I know what I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. I'm looking for their pleasure. I'm looking for their their building. Or
something. You don't... The thing that I hate the most, whether it's with a client or, somebody I'm playing with, they're just sitting there. They're quiet. But that can be fun, I suppose, because that's when I really want to lay into them. It's like, I'm going to make you make a noise.
Response, right.
But that is something I do ask people before I play with them, especially, when you're playing with somebody the first time, you never know what's going to happen. And it's never probably going to be the best, scene ever. It could be. But, when you're playing with somebody the first time, it's always awkward. And I do like a roller coaster kind of thing. It's like, I'll take them to a point where I think that they can make it, and then I'll take them back down. And then I'll take them back up, and then I'll take them back down. That's what I'm talking about, an endorphin kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I do the same.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, you never know what their response could be. So I always ask them, it's like, are you a quiet kind of person when you play, or are you like a noisy screamer? And, it kind of breaks the ice and just stuff like that. But I will, make you get a reaction. And if you don't react, then I'll just leave you there and I'll go ignore you. And if you don't like that and you come up to me and say, well, that was awful, I'm like, well, you weren't making any reaction. I thought that was the scene. I just did the scene. I'm ignoring you. Sorry. You're furniture, which I actually like to do. I like to turn people into human furniture. That's a lot of fun. That's something that really I enjoy. But, you talk about things about what gives us pleasure as doms or pro-doms or with regular play partners. Honestly, I think it really is just being able to have somebody you can be that intimate with and trust.
Sorry.
It's okay. You can phase that out. It's all right. You can just edit it out. Here, let me try it again. The thing. What did I say? I don't remember anymore. I forgot what I said because I'm all over the place. Who's listening anyway? But the thing is that when you're playing with somebody, this is truly play. Play is good for you. But whether it involves, dangling somebody off the side of a building, or if it's something as small as like tickling. There are people who totally get off on tickling. I know so many ways on how to tickle somebody, but it just depends on the person and on the play. You never know where anything's going to go. And I think that's probably why I like it a lot, being a top, because I get to open them up. They're like, what's that myth, Pygmalion, where you've got this sculpture who does this beautiful goddess, sculpture and wants her to be turned into life because she's so beautiful and all that sort of stuff. It's that fantasy. I feel in some ways I am that marble goddess that these guys are looking up to, you know, but then you bring up the expectations, and there is some of that. I appreciate the fact that I can take joy from doing things to people like spanking them or whatever. I mean, it's like, you know, who gets to fucking do this? I mean, you can't go to, I have a hard time at my day job. And some of the people there, even though it's a very laid back office, I work with, you know.
Is it a full-time job?
It is a full-time job.
Okay.
Because it has health benefits. And I will tell you that being a pro-dom does not. You know, unless you pay for it yourself. So it's one of those things where I felt like I had to go back to being financially stable, and I'm reinventing my pro-domme. You know, I'm being more lifestyle than pro-dom, because I don't want to spend 60 to 80 hours working for only a couple of sessions a week. It's cyclical. It's hard work. You know, it's not just putting on a black corset and carrying a whip and wearing high heels. If you don't know how to use it, you could hurt somebody, or yourself for that matter. I mean, hell, I teach people to walk in high heels all the time. You know, I don't know how many people can walk in ballet boots, but I do it regularly. I make clips and things like that. You know, these are ways to express yourself in fantastical, you know, emotions that can be very difficult for some people to comprehend, I think, because they see it as sex, and it is for them. But, you know, it's more than that. There's a definite intimacy with BDSM that even as a professional dame, I still have, because of the types of things that I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Yes. So what happened after kinky college? Where did you go from there?
Got involved in various relationships, and he happened to be very, very busy.
DS relationships?
Yes, a DS relationship.
Okay.
That was the MS.
So your husband was over at that point?
Yes, we were divorced.
Okay.
And I ended up then my relationship went into the MS relationship for 5 years, which I actually really enjoyed. I liked the fact that I had a sir who would tell me what to wear during the day. But, you know, little things like that got old after a while, too.
So it was a 24/7 live-in?
Yes, it was a 24/7 live-in. And it also is what caused me to lose custody of my child. So BDSM and kink, even if you're not doing it in front of your child, it's like, you know, I would call him sir. I think that's disrespectful. And I would feed him first, you know, because that was what we had agreed upon. You know, was I would put his plate down in a certain manner. But apparently my ex-husband, who was also trying to join the same sex club I already belonged to, who got into BDSM after, you know, I did.
It was a BDSM sex club?
It was a BDSM sex club, yes.
Okay.
You know, I found out later that he looked online and saw my pictures up for a particular event he wanted to go to, and literally 3 days later I had full custody papers at my door, you know, because of me being viewed as being an inappropriate mother for doing the things that I like to in the bedroom.
So why did you allow yourself to be photographed? You didn't think it was going to go into your personal life? You thought that your ex-husband would never see the photos?
No. I mean, well, one, I'm a fetish model. It's something I've done for over a decade.
Yes, but did he know that at that point?
My husband, yes, he did.
Okay.
But I don't think that he had seen them, and because they were up on a site where my son might possibly see them if he explored at some point, you know, he tried to use that. But really what happened was somebody in the community who we were mutual friends with outed me because they were at the same event, and they pointed it out and pointed the pictures up to him. I found that out later.
Okay.
So, you know, because BDSM is so not, it's judged to be deviant behavior. You know, even though he did it himself, he just lucked out in me having physical proof online that he could show a judge who was very saying, oh my God, that's so horrible, you know, when it wasn't anything more than what he was doing. You know, he did it in the bedroom with his wife, or new wife, so it's like, it's.
But it wasn't in your relationship with him?
No.
Okay.
He refused.
And it wasn't in the upbringing of
my child either. No, just when he got older and he asked, you know, because his dad actually brought it up to him and stuff when he was 12 or 13, I think it was, and said what a crazy mom I am for doing all of these things, and at that point my son was like, well, she taught me how to throw a bullwhip because I was performing and things with whips and you know, knocking paper, you know, and doing targets with whips and things. I mean, I've taken BDSM
with the circus shows.
Yes, with the circus shows.
Okay.
And things like that, and the BDSM. So, you know, it's not every mom who lays on a bed of nails. I'm sure that was interesting, and it led to some legal ramifications. So,
not everyone comes from that that philosophy of, you know, because in your early childhood your parents did this to you,
right,
or that you went through abusive relationships as a child, you know, you turn out to
be BDSM and kinky. Yeah, no, that.
I mean, my first experiences were when I was 7 years old, prepubescent, had nothing to do with sex. I used to take my next door neighbor out into the woods behind the house, tie her to a tree, and whip her. We called it interrogation. We were playing Army.
That's awesome.
That's all we were doing. We were playing Army. And, you know, from there, it just kept going and going and going. So all my life, I've been into it. Where did it come from? I have no clue.
And when I was in college, I was having my dates, you know, tie me up with scarves and play with daggers on me. You know, I was into Renaissance fair stuff, so I was into swords and armor. And one of the biggest fantasy scenes that I remember was in Excalibur when Igraine is being raped by, you know, Uther Pendragon as her husband, you know, transformed by Merlin. And I'm sitting there going like, here I've had a personal issue with this, but yet I have this fantasy, you know, since I was a child whenever Excalibur came out in the 80s, I guess I was a teenager. But still, you know, we have all of these influences in our life. And so you ask me, like, when did I become kinky? I've always been that way.
It's always been there, yeah.
You know?
Just wanted to know the progression of it. How did it go? So then you were in the DS relationships. You had a bad one. Well, no, then you were pro-domme.
That's when I became a pro-dom, yes,
yeah,
because
okay.
he required me to pay rent for living there. And so that was the only job that was acceptable because it was during the hours in which he worked.
Okay.
I know it sounds weird, but he couldn't actually accept the fact that I went over and I was a better dom than him. Isn't that kind of funny? That's where our relationship went downhill.
Well, did you learn from him things that he did with you?
Yeah, because we used to go around and teach rope. And I learned a lot of rope from him, a lot of shibari. But I also learned it from a lot of other people because he wasn't as good as he thinks he is. Okay. You know, he learned too, but it turned out that he became a better photographer and a better educator in the kink community by me being there, because the partnership that we had at the time really made it so that we were good in combination when we taught things. Mm-hmm. But behind the scenes, our private life was just a mess. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And it ended poorly. So, and I don't know if that was the MS relationship or the fact that I was a pro-dom, because he required, you know, he was my sir. I did what he asked me to do. But I have permanent body damage from things that I did for this gentleman, you know, and stuff, just because of wanting to please him. And I think when you're trying to be in a BDSM and an SM, really a slave master relationship, you know, the submissive role, the slave role is oftentimes really misunderstood by the people who think they want to be. You know what I mean?
That they want to be slaves.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't mean that as bad. There are true slaves. I mean, there are people that's all they want to be. And I know quite a few of them. They have a slave's heart and they just want to please people and serve people and do good things for them and be with them. And I see absolutely nothing wrong with that. You know, there's nothing wrong with being a slave. I agree with it. I have my own. Collared, actually. I have one collared slave. But, you know, it's, I think, a natural tendency for when you first get into the kink community like I did, into that MS relationship. He wanted to collar me. I didn't necessarily want to get the collar right away. I wanted to earn it. But then that collar became like a control thing. I mean, it, you know, if he didn't like what I was doing, he'd threaten to take it off, which I think is inappropriate, you know, things like that. Just because I do a lot of human animal training, like puppies, ponies, you know, people who want to be a puppy, people who want to be a pony, people who be a kitty. So, and I have a background in horse training and dog training. I've worked in kennels, worked in stables. So I take that experience in and train people. And in that particular MS relationship, he saw the things that I was good at as threatening, because I would be getting praise when we'd go to an event and they would be thinking that he was my boy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it felt like, I think,
there was jealousy then.
Yeah.
Okay.
He resented my shining star.
Okay.
And I only became his slave because that was the only way he would have a relationship with me. Okay. And there are people like that. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, Like when you're in an MS relationship, you either agree to the binding verbal contract and sometimes a written contract, or you don't. And either one of you can, leave.
Break it. Yeah. Sit anytime.
Yeah. So it just kind of depended. And he tried to break it, but he didn't have the personal thing. So, rather than, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that particular relationship gave me a good window into what not to do for my next BDSM relationship.
Which was what, another MS relationship?
Yes,
that?
but I'm the top this time.
Okay.
I decided that since I really was honestly more a switch towards the top end, as a service top, that I would stick with that. And like I said, I got out of that relationship and stuck with a professional domme, and I think it made me more stable because I could see.
Okay, so that was the bad relationship.
That was the bad relationship. Okay. And I've had other relationships since then, but primarily it's been more. I've even had a vanilla relationship, and boy, did that one turn out horrible. So that's one of the reasons why I know that I have to have this in my life. I have to be kinky, BDSM, lifestyle, leather, something in my life, because if I'm not, then I'm just completely unhappy. I cannot live without it for a couple of years. It just sucked.
Why did you do the vanilla relationship?
I met him as a guy at a friend's karaoke going away party, and we just clicked. And I tried to, he had some tendencies, so I guess he would be vanilla with sprinkles. I mean, people in the community, you've heard that term before, I'm pretty sure, where he had some kinky leanings and could be so trained, for the sexual aspects of it. But, he was not a good person. So once again, it's one of these things where being into BDSM and kink, and also most especially being a professional domme, is something that has really made it difficult for me to find trustworthy play partners.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to Bound to Talk. Look for us on YouTube, iTunes, or visit boundtotalk.com.